didn't divulge, that's right.
Right, full disclosure.
I can't believe this. I didn't
Full
do that, because that was the whole point of that thing.
Right, family affair.
My sister, who is amazing, she's 2 years younger. We joke that she's my older sister.
The best Bazer.
She has, she is the bureau chief of disability rights
in
for
the Illinois Attorney
General.
General's office.
So I was reading up about you, and every single article begins with, as you would expect, Attorney General Lisa Madigan sues, and then it's somebody else who's done some
horrible thing.
So, like, when you think about people now, when you look out at this crowd, do you think they're just a bunch of vile creatures who are ready to do something awful that you're going to have to...
No, but you know, here's what happens. If you go to law school, you are trained to look for violations of the law, which is why I come in here and I say to you, oh, look, not accessible. How would I ever get my wheelchair in here? And so, no, I don't look at
So you're a real buzzkill at parties.
Yeah. I was pretty surprised you invited me. Not known for my humor.
We had Toni Preckwinkle on, and I asked her about that because some people would always say this. And I said, well, you told somebody that your favorite comedian was Rodney Dangerfield. And I thought that it shows that you have a sense of humor. And she says, oh, my husband told me to say that. Anyhow, so has your view of human nature changed in any way?
Sure. I see every single day people who are, and this is no fun to talk about, so let's do this really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, child pornographers. I mean, people who are exploiting consumers. And so, yes, when you see horrible things taking place to people every single day, you know that there are a lot of those folks out there, and you try to do everything you can to better protect, the good people who are trying to, be productive, have a good quality of life, and who are too often thwarted because of other folks who are trying to make a quick buck or just have no morals and don't want to follow the law.
Explain to me, then, the job. And I know that sounds very basic, but I think...
No, nobody has any idea what the Attorney General
Well,
does.
I mean, don't worry. Yeah.
See?
Don't worry, everybody here votes for you, so it doesn't really matter.
But no, just yesterday, in fact, somebody said, oh, State's Attorney Madigan. And I said, no, I'm the Attorney General, but that's okay, you're never going to understand the difference.
Those are different, yeah, I guess you guys are very different. What do you think about, Let
me just answer the question.
Oh, right.
So, looking at the audience, actually most of you, not all of you, I expected it to be a much younger crowd. But so making friends, that's the other reason I didn't think I was going to be invited.
You're not in a runoff in April.
You're stuck with me for about 4 more years. Here's what the Illinois Constitution says. The Illinois Constitution basically says that I am the chief legal officer for the state of Illinois, and nobody knows what that means. What I say to people is I run the state's largest public interest law firm. So there are 700 employees, 350 lawyers, and our job is to represent the state of Illinois, which I look at as not just sort of, this corporate entity, but also, the state of Illinois is made up of the people of the state of Illinois, and so my job is to represent them. In terms of the legal work we do, it's everything. It's civil, it's criminal, it's appellate work, and so most people, when they see, Lisa Madigan sued, it tends to be a consumer case. It could be an environmental case, public utilities, is another thing that we look after. We help people trying to get their health care coverage. So I'm the lawyer for the state. I run a very large law firm on everyone's behalf. That's what I do.
So where does the job, here's what I'm trying to understand. On the one hand, you have the responsibility to make sure that, in some ways, that the law is enforced, that people aren't abusing the law. But then there seems to be other parts of it in which you're doing advocacy work.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
So where is the line there?
Well, here's what happens. So let's use consumer as the example because it's not as miserable as talking about a lot of the criminal situations. Sure. So consumer. For years now, we've had people coming to our office and talking to us about the situation they have with their mortgage. Oh, I thought I had a fixed rate mortgage. They told me I had a fixed rate mortgage, but it turns out I don't. Suddenly my rate went up on my mortgage and we can't pay for it. because of that, and seeing that not just 2 times or 10 times, but more than 1,000 times, we then start doing an investigation, right? We then find that this is, the industry practice across not just Illinois, but the country. And so at that point, we can file lawsuits, but the other thing we end up doing oftentimes is to go to the legislature in Springfield, or sometimes I even go out to DC and go in front of Congress and talk about what we've seen as a way for them to change laws, both at the state level and at the national level. So there is an aspect of my job that it's advocacy work. When we find problems, we have more ways than just lawsuits to address them. Oftentimes we go ahead and change the laws, or if there are things where we don't have an ability to change the law, you get behind the microphone and use the bully pulpit aspect of the office.
Well, let's talk about the mortgage thing, because I know recently you got together with other Attorney General offices around the country, and you, I guess, brought a suit, and there was a settlement, and I think it was with Wells Fargo, or was it Bank of America? It was
Countrywide, so it's now, which is now owned by Bank of America.
Right,
we do have an ongoing lawsuit against Wells Fargo and another one against Countrywide. So you pick.
Well, there was a settlement.
Correct.
And Illinois got, I think it was like $40 million or something like that, to help out with people who had mortgage foreclosure problems. But there was an article this week in the New York Times, which was all about how all of this money that was supposed to go to help people who were in foreclosure trouble, they weren't getting it. And then there was also that the banks themselves weren't keeping up their ends of the deal. With this particular one, have Illinois residents got the money that is due to them?
So yes, I mean, there was so in the Countrywide settlement, and this was a settlement where, consumer fraud case, predatory lending had taken place, all these strange things you hear about, option arms, adjustable rate mortgages, the answer is part of the settlement was money that went to people who had lost their homes here in Illinois because they were put into predatory loans. Yes, that money has been distributed. In addition, the other aspect of the settlement is requiring Bank of America now to determine who those folks were and to go and to see if they can do a loan modification to keep them in their homes. So yes, many people have had their loans modified. But are there people who still need help? Yes, so we were able at that point to sue Countrywide over a certain group of their loans, but it wasn't just Countrywide. I mean, it was all the major banks that were involved, and they're now also servicers. And I'm not sure which article you're talking about. I think the article you might be talking about is in terms of the money under TARP that was supposed to go, I think, to HAMP to help people. An enormous amount of that money has never actually gone to homeowners. But that would be a federal program.
That was part of it. And then the other part was just that the banks themselves are, like, you call up and they'll say, oh, we lost your paperwork.
And
so there's
then
a
you'll
lot
call
of
up
cheating
again,
by
and they'll say
yeah.
they lost your paperwork. And then you'll send it in again, and then when you call, they'll say, we lost your paperwork. And it happens, and you're supposed to laugh here, it happens like 4 or 5, 6 times, but truly it's actually not funny. Because these are real live people who are doing their best to meet the demands that the banks have so that they can, in some way either reduce their interest rate and put, the amount that they, would have had to pay sooner on the back end. I mean, there are all sorts of different things they can do to modify your loan, but people are really desperate, obviously, to stay in their homes in this very, very challenged economy. And the servicers, which is what they really call the arm of the bank that you make your mortgage payment to, have been terrible, quite frankly, in doing loan modifications. And then what they're now doing, and you've probably heard about it, it's called robo-signing. Yeah. So in robo-signing is what emanates out of them trying to put you in foreclosure and get you out of your house sooner rather than later because they don't actually follow the law. In fact, they're filing false affidavits where people don't have personal knowledge of the information. We've seen affidavits filed here in Cook County where literally, instead of actually signing the name, the lawyers put a check mark where their name should be. And so you think, well, is the lawyer illiterate? Or, what's going on? Yeah. And so there are significant problems, and we are working trying to resolve that as well. But that's going to be
And this is something you're working on with other states as well?
With other states and the federal government. So Department of Justice, Treasury Department. We were actually out earlier this week in Washington, D.C. with a meeting with 5 of the servicers, trying to see if we can find some common ground to resolve this. And if not, then we'll sue them.
There you go. You heard it. Well, let's talk about a lighter topic. What do you think about the plural of attorneys general?
I can tell you all about it.
Yeah.
Because this is a common question I get asked. not so much anymore, but this is really the first time we've met. So
Yeah.
you commonly get asked the question of, well, what do I call an attorney general? And quite frankly, attorney general, I'm not a general, right? I don't hold the rank of general. Although you will find that if you were to meet another attorney general, most people will say, oh, general, insert last name, when in fact that's just incorrect. So attorney is the right word to make plural. It's attorneys general if there are more than one of us that you're referring to. So that's what I think about it.
But it's like when people say, instead of RBIs, RSBI.
You make a really good point.
Thank you.
You make a really good point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk about a few other issues that have been real. Well, let me ask you this. When you first ran for Attorney General, back in 2002, in that campaign, you talked about a number of things which you have followed up on.
Yeah, we did everything.
Every single thing you talked about in the campaign.
We kept the list.
But there was there was the whole nursing home, Operation Guardian, which you've done, and that's basically going in and making sure that there's not abuse at nursing homes.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Because this is really.
I hope we would.
I don't think people understand or believe this. But how much time do we have?
We have
2 minutes.
No,
so
we
here's
got
the
time.
deal. A number of years ago, probably about 3-4 years ago, and I could be misremembering the time, I got a call from a mayor of a small South suburban community, and he said to me, Lisa, I don't know what to do. You're my last hope. So we have a nursing home in our community, and some of the residents are criminals, and they've been setting fires, and they abuse people, and we just don't know what to do.
Wait, who's the people who are...
The residents. This is what I want you to hear. Residents.
But how
I want you to
how
hear
old were
that
they?
as opposed to employees.
Yeah.
I don't recall
Okay.
how old they were. So they're probably not as old as you would anticipate most nursing home residents to be, and that's a subset of this problem, but let's not ask that question because
Okay.
that's another tangent.
Okay.
So we go in and we see...
I'll choose the questions I
Yes.
ask.
It's the interview show. So we go in and we're like, oh, this is a problem. And so we try to say to the administrators, we try to say to the people who are in place, hey, you all have to control your residents. They can't be beating up folks. They can't be setting fires.
Sure.
This is not safe. And they choose not to do anything about it. So again, we bring out the big gun and we file a lawsuit and we shut down the nursing home. Because if it's not safe for the residents, then it shouldn't be operating. Okay, in addition to that, we say, well, this is probably not the only nursing home in the state of Illinois where there are residents who are criminals. So we need to know if there are criminals living in nursing homes so that we can, put in place some safety mechanisms. So we pass a law, and a little while later we learn, well, we're not so sure that the law is being enforced. So we decide to do an unannounced spot check of a nursing home where we go in and we ensure that this identified offenders law is actually being used. Well, listen to this. Ignore that for a minute, because when we go in, we find that there are residents with active criminal warrants. So
Oh my
right,
word.
living in nursing homes. So to date, and I'm trying to think how long we've been doing this, maybe about 1.5 years. To date, we have been in 27 nursing homes all around the state, Chicago and all the way down south and western Illinois. Anyway, and we have found 161 people,
Oh my God.
the vast majority of whom are residents, who have active criminal warrants.
Well, I guess my mom's moving in with me.
Right. Well, it's a good point, because people, when we do press conferences on this, the reporters will say, well, what do you do to make sure that your loved one is safe? And I say, you have to go and visit them pretty much every day.
I don't get it. I just don't get it. Why are these criminals moving into nursing homes?
Sometimes they need the care.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't. So, quite often when we go in and there is somebody with an active criminal warrant, we arrest them and we remove them from the nursing home. Sometimes we can't because there's a geographic limitation on the warrant. So they're from Colorado or they're from California or Florida, and somehow, in ways that we don't know, they've ended up in a nursing home in Illinois. So I'm not always sure how they get there. Many times they do have medical conditions that require them to be there, but sometimes they're fit enough to leave. And when they are, we arrest them. But once we identify them, obviously, we say, okay, you know, they have to have a safety plan in place, and they've got to be following the law that we talked about. One other thing, we have found 15 missing people in nursing homes.
You found the people.
Right, living in a nursing home.
Oh, my word.
So, like your mother disappears and you call the police and say, my mom, she's missing, and 2 years later, I find her in a nursing home.
Wow.
For real.
Just watching The Feud or something.
Right.
Yeah. Okay,
But that happens.
this is an issue that
Right.
100% of the people of Illinois can get behind, I would assume. Nobody wants there to be, except for the criminals themselves, nobody wants there to be this at nursing homes. There are other issues, such as recently in the news, your office has said that people's gun ownership should be public record.
Well,
That-
let me tell you what I
all
said,
right,
since
all right.
you and everybody else. One of the things that we have been working on since I became the Attorney General is to ensure that there is a way for members of the public, members of the media, anybody, to contend with potential violations of our Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act. So what we refer to as our sunshine laws, the transparency laws. People should know what's happening in their government, what resources are being used, everything.
Even in Illinois.
Even in Illinois. In fact, I would say it's probably very important in Illinois.
Okay.
So we had an opportunity when our previous governor was leaving office to go to the legislature and to say, here are a lot of examples of why we need a really, hardy FOIA law. And part of what we did was to statutorily put in place a public access counselor. An individual, it turns out to be a very large group of individuals because of the volume of requests, where if you've asked for documents and the public body has said, no, you can't get those documents, or if, you want to go to the school board meeting and they exclude you from the school board meeting, you can come to our office and say, here's what happened, will you please look at this and tell us whether or not the law was followed. And so the public access counselor in the situation you've described was responding to an AP reporter's request to the Illinois State Police for a list of people with FOID cards. Here in the state of Illinois, if you are legally to have a firearm, you have to apply for a FOID card. And so there's a list that the state police obviously maintains of people who've been issued these cards. Okay, the reporter says to state police, I want the list. The state police says, we're not giving you the list. The reporter comes to the public access counselor's office and says, can I have the list? And so we look at the FOID law, we look at the FOIA law, the Freedom of Information Act, we look at federal law, we look at case law also at the federal level and the state level. And essentially, here's what it all boils down to. Here in Illinois, there is no privacy protection for that actual list. Now, you can agree or disagree that it's a good thing to provide that list, and obviously people have very strong opinions on both ends of that issue. But in terms of ensuring open government, there's nothing that protects that list right now. And
So you're
the
saying
public
it wasn't
access-
your opinion, it was just your reading of the law.
Right, I mean, we basically tell people, the public access counselor is there to tell the public what the law is, or members of the media when they're the people asking, and we like to think you're members of the public as well. So we basically, that's the role we play in that position. So it wasn't Lisa Madigan decides to demand all FOID card members'
Sure.
names must be public. It was,
Do you think they should be?
I think the legislature is going to make that decision because now there are, all sorts of bills have been introduced to have that debate. But I'll tell you, there have been some interesting things done in other states. So Florida and Tennessee, similar situations, although those were, I think, concealed carry permits, where the reporter said, we want a list of people who actually have these. And then in Florida, I think it was the Sun Sentinel did, an investigation and determined that there were over 1,000 people who had concealed carry permits who were in fact convicted criminals. Ooh.
Wow.
Tennessee, similar situation. I don't remember the news outlet. I don't remember who did it, but I think they found 70 people or something of that nature who actually had been convicted of a serious crime and then therefore shouldn't have had this concealed carry permit, shouldn't be allowed to carry a gun. So there have been very legitimate uses of that information, but in the aftermath of that, both in Florida and Tennessee, what the legislature did was to suddenly say, nope, all those names are going to be private. We're never going to let the public have access to that. So it wouldn't surprise me if something similar happens in Illinois, but I don't know.
Sure. Well, we got a few minutes left. Can we talk about your personal life?
I'm married. Sorry. And so are you, I hear.
I am. No. You're married to a cartoonist.
I am.
And he's got stuff. He's great. He's got stuff in the New Yorker all the time.
Yeah, he brings the funny, not me.
How did you meet?
In a sandwich shop. At the Costello's in Roscoe Village.
Yeah.
Do you want more? Okay.
Yeah.
You got that.
I don't know. Were you working at the sandwich shop?
I was, but not behind the counter. So I had stopped there to actually have lunch and write a speech. I was on my way to Decatur one day, and this really cute guy stops at my table and says, hey, I noticed you when you walked in, and then they called your name for your sandwich. Are you Lisa Madigan? And at the time, I was in the state Senate, and I would.
Do you give your name, Attorney General Lisa Madigan, to the?
I was in the state Senate.
Yeah.
No, I just gave
right.
you weren't listening.
No, I wasn't. It's the first rule of interviewing, too. Okay, so he wants to talk to you.
And so I said, well, hey, if you don't mind watching me eat my sandwich, sit down. Because essentially what he said was, I've been meaning to stop by your office and set up a meeting.
The oldest line in the book.
It was great. And as I mentioned, he's cute. So I thought, wow, this never happens. So he sat down, and we had this really awkward conversation. It was 45 minutes of he's talking to me about consulting and stuff that I have nothing to do with.
What do you mean? I thought he was a cartoonist.
Well, right, but don't even.
Okay.
So, and I'm sitting there thinking, is he hitting on me? Can I flirt? Or am I supposed to be the serious state senator? And when you do a combo of those things, it's really bad. So it's all a miracle. At the end, we exchange cards, and he walks me out to my car, and I drive off to Decatur, and I think I stopped in Bloomington. I was in a number of places. Anyway, I get back to Chicago. I get back to my office on Friday, and he sent me an email. And the email is kind of a recap of the really awkward conversation we had.
Yeah.
And at the very end, it says, but if there's ever anything I can do for you, whether it's, licking envelopes or sharing another, I'm an elected official, that's what we do.
Yeah.
But
that could have been a euphemism.
It wasn't.
I'm sorry.
Or sharing another greasy sandwich. Give me a call.
Yeah.
And so I was like, aha, he was flirting, right? So I called him, and we went out, and we're married, we have kids. It was great.
And you, from what I understand, you live a pretty normal life in the city of Chicago. You're not flying around all the time or anything like that. You go home, you have dinner and everything like that.
Right, I missed dinner tonight because of you.
Yeah, the tamale guy will be here in a little bit, so.
That's not bad.
Yeah, they're good.
I didn't know dinner was served. This is perfect.
So the last question, and I know that this is something that people in the media fixate on more. You say that you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to think about it. You don't think about your future career as much as other people do. But you went to school at Georgetown.
Right.
And then during that time you worked a little bit for Senator Paul Simon, so you know the D.C. area. If a job opened up there, is it a town you like, you'd move back to?
It's a very transient town.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was out there when Reagan was president, so things are much better now. Perspective. Right now, I like being in Chicago. I like being in Illinois. We talk. My kids are little. It would have to be the right opportunity at the right time.
I'm thinking like a sandwich shop. Well, thank you very much.
Mark, it's my pleasure.
Attorney General Lisa Madigan.